The best birthday gift you could give me, Mom, is just to die. That was what my daughter Angela told me on her 46th birthday. Her words didn't come with a laugh or a wink or any sign she was joking. They were delivered cold, sharp, and deliberate, like a knife plunged straight into my chest. Before I continue, let me pause here. If you're watching this, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. These stories are based on real lives, painful betrayals, and the courage to reclaim dignity. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? I always love seeing how far these stories travel. My name is Margaret, I'm 73 years old, and for most of my life I believed my role was to sacrifice everything for my daughter. I was wrong. This is my story of how one birthday wish turned my entire world upside down. I had woken up early that morning, my hands busy tying ribbons on the white box that held the chocolate strawberry cake I had ordered from Angela's favorite bakery. $200 was a lot for me these days, but for my only child no price ever felt too high. As I carried the cake to my car, I thought about the look of surprise she would give me, the way her eyes used to shine when she was a little girl and I showed up with something special. The drive to her house was short, and with every mile I whispered silent prayers. Let today be a happy one. Let her smile. Let me feel like a mother again. When I knocked on the door, the weight of the cake in my arms seemed lighter than the weight of my anticipation. The door opened and there stood Angela, tall, elegant, with her silk blouse and freshly done hair. But her expression was not joy. It was annoyance. "Oh, it's you," she muttered. No hug. No spark in her eyes. Just irritation. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said softly, lifting the cake so she could see. "I brought your favorite. Chocolate with strawberries, just like when you were a little girl." Angela sighed as if I had brought her a burden, not a gift. "Come in," she said flatly. Not a thank you. Not even a glance at the cake. Inside, her home was as beautiful as always. The same house I had helped her buy 10 years ago with $150,000 from my retirement savings. A home I had once been proud to gift her. I placed the cake on the kitchen counter, the candles already melting slightly in the warmth of the room. "Mom, we need to talk," Angela began, her voice distant, her arms crossed. "Yes, of course," I said, my heart eager to please. "Tell me what you want. A trip? Some jewelry? Maybe that car you mentioned last month?" She looked me dead in the eyes, and in that gaze I didn't see my daughter. I saw contempt. "The one thing I'd love most," she said slowly, savoring every word, "is for you to just die." The world stopped. I couldn't breathe. My ears rang with the echo of those words. My hands trembled and I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. What did you just say?" My voice cracked like an old violin string. "You heard me," she replied coldly. "I'm tired of your constant calls, your visits, your hovering. My life would be so much easier if you weren't around anymore." I thought of the years, decades, I had spent putting her first. Working double shifts as a schoolteacher so she could have piano lessons. Selling my mother's jewelry to pay for her antibiotics when she was sick at 3. Taking a second mortgage to cover her third change of college major. Paying for her dream wedding in a ballroom with crystal chandeliers. Covering mortgage payments when her husband Mark lost his job. Babysitting her twins whenever she wanted, date nights. Every sacrifice flashed through my mind like lightning in a storm. "Angela," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "I've given you everything. I've lived my whole life for you." "Exactly," she cut in, standing taller. "That's the problem. You've smothered me with your sacrifices. I can't breathe. I want freedom." The $200 cake sat between us, absurd and melting as though mocking me. I carried that cake out of her house with trembling hands, my heart in pieces. I had dreamed of hugs, of laughter, of a family dinner. Instead, I was given death as a gift request. When I reached the threshold, I turned back one last time, searching for even a flicker of regret in her eyes. All I saw was impatience for me to leave. "Happy birthday, Angela," I murmured, my voice barely audible. Then I stepped out and closed the door behind me. That night, back in my small apartment, I placed the cake in the trash. The melted candles looked like little corpses of my hopes. I sat on my old sofa, the same one where I had rocked her as a baby, where I had read her bedtime stories, and I wept until dawn. But as the sun rose, something inside me shifted. The sorrow that had drowned me all night began to turn into something else. Something sharper. Bigger. Clarity. If my daughter truly wanted me gone, then perhaps it was time to give her exactly what she asked for. Not by dying, but by disappearing. And this time she would learn what it really meant to live without me. When dawn broke after that cursed birthday, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. For 73 years, I had been a mother who gave without limits. Now for the first time I was asking myself, what if I stopped? What if I disappeared? I brewed a cup of coffee with shaky hands, staring at the rising steam as though it could give me answers. The silence in my apartment felt heavier than ever, but within that silence came a strange clarity. If Angela wanted a life without me, she would have it. But on my terms. The first step was the bank. I dressed carefully that morning. Blue cardigan, neat slacks, polished shoes. I wanted to look strong, not broken. When I entered the branch, the manager, Mr. Lewis, greeted me with a kind smile. He had known me for years, back when I used to deposit paychecks from the school district. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner," he said. "How can I help you today?" "I want to close joint account number 9834221, I replied, steady but calm. His eyebrows lifted. "That's the account you share with your daughter, correct? It has quite a balance, around $25,000. "Yes," I answered firmly. "Transfer all of it into my personal account." He hesitated, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But when I signed the papers, I felt something awaken in me. That money had been sitting there as an emergency cushion for Angela and her family. Now it was mine again. Mine to use for my survival, my peace, maybe even my freedom. Walking out of the bank, I felt lighter, almost giddy. It was only the beginning. The next stop was the mortgage office. A year earlier, when Mark had lost his job, I had co-signed their mortgage to save them from foreclosure. I remembered Angela's tears as she hugged me, whispering, "Mom, you're our savior." But now those very papers gave me leverage. The loan officer, a woman named Ms. Carter, pulled the file from her cabinet. "Mrs. Turner, as co-signer, you are legally responsible if payments are missed. But that also gives you rights. If the primary holders can't maintain stability, you can petition to reclaim the property." I thought about the 8 months I had covered when Mark was unemployed. I thought about Angela's smug face when she told me to die. "Thank you," I told Ms. Carter, slipping the copies into my bag. That's all I needed to know. When I stepped back into the sunlight, I felt the first spark of vengeance warming my chest. But the most important visit was to my lawyer, Mr. Caldwell. He had been a friend of my late husband, a man of 75 with kind eyes and a sharp mind. "Margaret," he said warmly when I entered his office. "It's been too long. What brings you here today?" I sat down, folded my trembling hands, and spoke. "I need to change my will, Mr. Caldwell. Everything that once had Angela's name on it, I want it removed." He blinked. "Everything?" "Yes. My apartment, my savings, my life insurance. I want it all redirected. Half will go to the Children's Education Foundation where I've volunteered. The other half into a trust fund for my grandchildren, but locked until they're 25. Angela will never touch it." His pen hovered over his notepad. "Did something happen?" And so I told him. I told him every cruel word, every sacrifice, every moment of humiliation. His face grew darker with each detail. "Margaret," he said softly, "I'm so sorry. But I admire your clarity. We can make these changes immediately." For 2 hours we worked, drafting new documents, adjusting beneficiaries, signing papers. Each signature felt like a door closing behind me, and another one opening ahead. When I returned home, the afternoon sun cast long golden stripes across my small living room. I looked at my shelves lined with photo albums, every page filled with Angela's milestones. They once filled me with pride. Now they felt like chains. That night, as I sipped a glass of red wine, something I rarely allowed myself, I called an international travel agency I had bookmarked months ago. "Good evening," I said when a young woman answered. "My name is Margaret Turner. I'm interested in your relocation packages for retirees, particularly to Lisbon, Portugal." Her cheerful voice carried across the line. "Lisbon is one of our most popular destinations. Warm climate, affordable living, excellent health care. Would you like the information packet?" "Yes," I said, smiling to myself. "Everything you have. I want to know how a 73-year-old woman can start a brand new life." The following day I knocked on my neighbor's door. Helen had been my friend for over 10 years, a retired drama teacher with a mischievous smile. She invited me in for tea and I poured out my entire heart. She listened in silence, her eyes flashing with disbelief at Angela's cruelty. When I explained my plan, to vanish to let Angela believe I was gone, Helen set her cup down and leaned forward. "You're brilliant," she said. "That ungrateful woman has taken you for granted for too long. If you want me to play the part, I will. After all, I taught theater for 30 years. I laughed for the first time in days. "Helen, I'll need you to act as though you found my apartment empty. You'll deliver my farewell letter to Angela. You'll be the one to tell her I've disappeared." He grinned. "Then it will be the performance of my life." That evening I sat at my desk with pen and paper, drafting the most important letter I would ever write. "My dearest Angela," it began. "You asked me to disappear from your life, and I have decided to grant your wish." I wrote until midnight, every word a blend of sorrow and steel. I listed the sacrifices, the money, the years. I explained the legal changes, the cancelled health insurance I had paid for, the mortgage rights I now intended to exercise. But I ended with a truth sharper than any knife. "Your life will be easier without me. But it will also be much more expensive. I hope it is worth the price." By the time I placed the pen down, my hand ached, but my spirit felt stronger than it had in decades. I looked around my small apartment one last time, whispering to myself, "The woman who lived only for Angela died on her birthday. What comes next will be mine alone." And as I folded the letter into its envelope, sealing it with trembling fingers, I knew there was no turning back. Because next week Angela would wake up to find her mother gone, forever. The week after Angela's birthday was a blur of secret preparations. I withdrew $30,000 from my savings and locked it in a safe. I canceled the health insurance policy I had been paying for her family. I confirmed my ticket to Lisbon. And I packed only what mattered into 2 suitcases: clothes, photo albums, and the small locket with my late husband's picture. Helen, my neighbor, rehearsed her role like the drama teacher she had once been. "Remember," she told me with a grin, "I'll wait 2 days. Then I'll knock on your door, pretend to panic, and deliver your farewell letter to Angela. She won't know whether you're dead, lost, or gone for good." It was cruel, maybe. But so was wishing for your own mother's death. On Monday morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise, Helen knocked on my door one last time. She carried fresh coffee in a thermos and gave me a hug that lingered. "Ready for your great escape?" she whispered. "More than ready," I replied, forcing a smile. I handed her the spare keys to my apartment. She would be my accomplice, my messenger, my witness. Together we carried my suitcases down the stairs. The waiting taxi driver asked, "Airport?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "To the airport." As the car pulled away, I looked back at the little apartment I had called home for 15 years. Strangely, I felt no sadness, only relief. At the airport, my phone buzzed with messages from Angela. "Mom, the twins have a school presentation Friday. Can you watch them?" Another one, "Are you ignoring me? Stop being dramatic." I laughed bitterly. The same woman who told me to die now wanted me to babysit. I turned the phone off. The flight to Lisbon was 12 hours of silence and freedom. For the first time in decades, nobody knew where I was. Nobody could call me for favors, money, or endless needs. I sat by the window, watching clouds drift beneath me, and wrote in my journal, "This is what disappearing feels like, weightless." When the plane landed, a man named Raphael from the retiree relocation agency greeted me with a sign that said Mrs. Turner. He was young, kind, and spoke fluent English. "Welcome to Portugal," he said with a smile. "Are you ready for your new life?" "More than ready," I answered truthfully. He drove me to a furnished apartment near the Tagus River. It was modest but bright, with windows that opened to the sound of church bells and the smell of bread from the bakery downstairs. I unpacked slowly, letting each drawer swallow pieces of my old life. That first evening I walked to a small cafe and ordered a pastry and coffee. The waiter spoke Portuguese, but when I pointed he smiled warmly. As I bit into the flaky crust, tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, but from the realization that for once, I was spending money only on myself. Back in the US, Helen carried out the plan. She told Angela she hadn't seen me in days, that she had opened my apartment with the spare keys, and found it empty except for the letter on the table. Angela's first reaction wasn't sorrow, it was fury. He called me again and again. "Mom, what is this? Where are you? You can't just vanish. I let the calls go unanswered. For years I had been her safety net. Now I was letting her fall. The next day I finally answered one call. Angela, I said calmly. Mom, where are you? Helen said you're gone. What's happening? Her voice cracked with panic. Did you read the letter? I asked. Yes, but this is insane. You can't just leave. You can't cancel everything like this. You wanted me to disappear, I replied. I'm only respecting your wish. There was silence, then a sarcastic laugh. You're acting like a child, Mom. Come back. We need you. No, I whispered. You needed my money. Now you'll learn to live without it. And I hung up. The following morning a new blow came. A woman from social services called. Mrs. Turner, we've received a complaint from your daughter, Angela. She claims you may be suffering from dementia or cognitive decline, that your sudden disappearance and financial decisions put you at risk. My blood ran cold. Angela had stooped so low she was trying to brand me as insane. Miss, I said firmly, I am in Portugal by choice. I am of sound mind and I can prove it. Arrange an evaluation at the U.S. consulate. I'll comply fully. That Friday I underwent 3 hours of medical and psychological tests. The doctor, an older American, smiled kindly when we finished. Mrs. Turner, not only are you perfectly healthy, but your decisions show clarity and courage. Your daughter's complaint will be dismissed. I walked out of that office taller than I had in years. Angela had tried to erase my independence. Instead, she had strengthened my case. That night, as I sat by my apartment window listening to the street musicians below, my phone vibrated again. Dozens of messages poured in from Angela and Mark. Some were pleading, please Mom, the kids miss you. Come back. Others were threatening, if you don't fix this we'll lose the house. And finally, desperate, you're ruining our lives over a tantrum. I scrolled through them with a calm detachment. For the first time her panic was louder than mine. I typed one reply, I am safe. I am free. Do not look for me. Then I turned off the phone, poured myself a glass of Portuguese wine, and toasted to the woman I was finally becoming. But I knew this was only the beginning. Angela had tasted what life was like without me, and her reaction was pure desperation. Soon she would realize that the house she lived in was no longer secure. That the mortgage she relied on was my weapon. And when that day came she would finally understand what it truly meant to tell your mother she was better off dead. The first real shock didn't arrive as thunder. It came as an email from my lawyer, Mr. Caldwell. Payments delinquent. Bank proceeding. As co-signer who sustained 8 months previously, your claim to recover your initial down payment is strong. I reread the line about my rights 3 times. 4 years, responsibility, had been my only headline. I fed the mortgage, the wedding, the braces, the emergencies, without oxygen for myself. Now the fine print became oxygen. Angela sensed the shift before I said a word. Her messages turned brittle and breathless. Mom, the bank sent a notice. Mark says we need $5,000 by Friday. Can you transfer it? Another minutes later, this is your fault. If you hadn't overreacted, none of this would be happening. I didn't reply. Silence for once was not the absence of love. It was the presence of boundaries. Mr. Caldwell filed the petition. Paper moved through systems the way seasons move through trees. Quiet. I took long morning walks along the Tagus, past tiled walls and laundry drifting in river wind. I practiced saying bom dia to the grocer. I learned how to order sardines the way locals like them, charred, lemon bright. At night I felt fear tapping at the window. I let it. Fear, I have learned, gets bored when you stop entertaining it. Then the phone rang with the news. The bank had foreclosed. Process complete. Because I had once kept their roof from collapsing, because my name had carried their mortgage through dark water. The institution now recognized a different truth. I was owed. Recovered principal $150,000, Caldwell said, his voice even like a good violin. Accrued amounts bring it to $185. Transfer in 7 to 10 business days. Separate note, we've listed your apartment, interest strong. I rested my forehead against the cool window glass. Lisbon chattered below, unaware that a grandmother in a small 5th-floor flat had just gotten back pieces of herself long pawned as family duty. I didn't celebrate that night. I wrote. I wrote what nobody teaches mothers to write. A ledger of reciprocity. What was given? What was taken? What would never be taken again? Angela's responses changed tones the way storms change skies. First, indignation. You can't do this to your own daughter. Then bargaining. If you help us now, we'll set rules. You can see the kids more. Then a strange, hollow contrition. I didn't mean the birthday thing. I was stressed. We can fix this. I had spent decades being moved by weather. Now I watched it pass. Clouds look dramatic. They are still only water. Mark, surprisingly, wrote something human. I owe you an apology. I let the money make me lazy. I let Angela speak to you like you were an ATM that could be shouted at. I'm ashamed. I didn't absolve him. But I let the sentence land inside me like a clean stone. Helen visited one afternoon, carrying pasties de nata and gossip. They've moved, she said, settling on my little kitchen stool. Smaller place across town. Mark's taken a factory shift. Angela's working again. People noticed, you know. Not the foreclosure. The way she talked about you. Neighbors remember. I stirred tea, suddenly tired. I don't want humiliation for her, I said. Just consequence. Just truth. Helen cocked her head, a small smile. Then you have it. The social worker case closed with a thud and an apology. Evaluations indicate full capacity. Allegation unfounded. Record reflects false report. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like air returning to a room too long shut. Raphael from the agency introduced me to a local women's channel that filmed stories of reinvention. I agreed to an interview mostly because I wanted the words out of me. We recorded in a sunlit studio. One camera, one glass of water, one grandmother telling the camera, I was not born to be currency. The video traveled. Comments piled up like postcards from strangers who somehow knew my house. My daughter-in-law only calls when the car breaks. I thought duty meant never saying no. I'm 68 and just booked my first solo train ticket. I read until my eyes ached, then closed the laptop and let myself cry. Not for Angela. For the women we are and the women we weren't allowed to be. Money, oddly, grew quiet as soon as it stopped being asked to perform miracles for other people. Caldwell called again. My old apartment sold. Net $95,000 after expenses. The transfer landed beside the recovered down payment, beside my careful savings and a small fund Hare, my Portuguese advisor with the kind tweed jackets, had placed into municipal bonds. Conservative, steady, Hare said, sliding papers across a cafe table we turned into an office. It won't thrill the reckless. It will let you sleep. I like sleep, I told him. I also liked the way the timeline of my life no longer read. Wife, mother, wallet. It reads simpler. Margaret. We made a budget that wasn't a self-erasure. Language classes 3 times a week. A watercolor workshop on Thursdays where my apples looked like planets but the teacher called them bold. A day trip once a month to someplace I couldn't pronounce until I arrived. At night I practiced saying my age without apology. 73. 73 and finally unborrowed. Angela tried one last tactic. Pity dressed as love. The kids are asking for you. They don't understand why you vanished. Please don't punish them for my mistake. I read the message 3 times. Then I called Mr. Caldwell and asked him to add one line to the trust. Letters to the grandchildren permitted at my discretion. No parental mediation required once they reach legal age. A boundary made of paper can be a bridge later. Helen texted a photo from back home. The big house with a for sale sign already gone, a small balcony in its place in a different neighborhood. They'll be okay, she wrote. People survive when grown-ups stop holding umbrellas over their storms. I walked to the river and stood where ferries peel white from blue. I thought about how mothers are taught to love like floodplains. Take everything, hold everything, drown quietly. I decided I would be a harbor instead. The Women's Channel wrote again. Would I do a follow-up? Perhaps read from the journal I kept on the plane? I agreed on one condition. I could also share 3 resources for elder financial safety and scripts for saying no. They said yes. We recorded in a park. Lisboetas walked dogs through our shot. I didn't mind. Life should wander into our stories. That video traveled farther. A small publisher emailed about a book. We would talk later. For the first time, the kind of future that had always belonged to other people. The ones who didn't mortgage their dreams for someone else's emergencies. Walked over and sat next to me. Are you happy? Hare asked, unprompted, at the end of our budget session. I am calm, I said. Happiness feels like a daisy chain. Calm feels like bedrock. He nodded like a man who preferred geology to fireworks. Bedrock is what holds cities. One evening after language class, I found a thick envelope in my mail slot. No stamp, international courier label, my name written in careful, childish script. For a second I couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to white paper and ink. I took it upstairs with slow, ceremonial steps. I didn't set my keys down. I didn't turn on the light. By the window, I opened the flap and slid out 2 pages covered in looping letters and tiny drawings. Mountains, a little apartment window with a flower box, a stick figure grandma with curly hair. Dear Grandma, the first line began, Dad told us the truth about why you left. My throat closed. I sat. The room hummed like it does when a train passes somewhere your body remembers from childhood. I read the first sentence, then stopped myself. I didn't want to rush. Some letters you unspool like a hymn. I placed the pages on the table, smoothed their edges with the flat of my palm, and spoke aloud to the empty room. Tomorrow morning. With coffee. With the sun. Because after years of being demanded at midnight, I wanted to choose the hour my heart opened. I turned the envelope over. A small note was tucked in the back, another hand, older, familiar. Just 2 words written by Mark. Thank you. I didn't know for what. For consequence. For mirror. For the refusal that finally grew their courage. The river bells answered for me, soft and regular as breath. I set the letters beside my cup, pulled the curtains wide and let the city exhale around me, ready for once to meet morning on my own terms. Sometimes rebirth doesn't come with trumpets or applause. Sometimes it arrives as sunlight on a kitchen table, spilling across a letter written in a child's hand. Before I begin this final part, let me ask, if this story has moved you, please subscribe. These life stories of betrayal, justice, and late freedom only spread because of you. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I would love to know which city or country you're listening in. I'm Margaret Turner. 73 years old when this began, now 75. I lost a daughter, but I gained myself. And this is the closing chapter of my story. The morning after the envelope arrived, I brewed coffee slowly, deliberately, as though each swirl of steam was part of a ritual. I sat at the table, the letter in front of me, sunlight brushing its edges. My hands trembled, not from fear but from reverence. I unfolded the paper and read. Dear Grandma, Dad told us the truth about why you left. He said Mom said some very ugly things and that's why you started a new life. We want you to know we miss you and we are proud of you for being so brave. When we're older, we'd like to visit you in Portugal. We love you. The twins had signed their names in uneven handwriting, each letter filled with sincerity. Beside their words were little drawings. Mountains, a tiny stick figure grandmother with curly hair, a window with flowers. Tears spilled down my face. Not the bitter tears I had cried after Angela's birthday. These were tears of release, of gratitude, of confirmation. My decision had not destroyed everything. It had planted seeds in younger hearts. I picked up my pen and wrote back. My dearest grandchildren, your letter is the most beautiful gift I have received in years. I love you deeply and always will. When you are old enough to make your own decisions, my doors will be open. Until then, know this, words matter. They can wound or they can heal. Always choose respect. Always protect love. I sealed the letter and gave it to Helen to mail. My heart was lighter than it had been in decades. Months slipped into seasons. Lisbon became home, not escape. My Portuguese grew clumsy but confident. I joined a book club for retirees where we argued about poetry as though the fate of the world depended on metaphors. I painted fruit that looked like moons and my teacher said, art doesn't have to be accurate, only alive. And my money, strangely, quietly, grew. Without Angela's constant demands, my savings no longer bled. Investments matured. The foreclosure had returned more than I ever expected. By 75, I held over $600,000 in assets, more than at any point in my life. But it wasn't the number in the account that gave me peace. It was the fact that it was mine. Mine to use for the life I wanted, not the life someone else demanded. Then came the book. A small publisher reached out after my second interview went viral. Would you consider writing your full story? The editor, a woman named Sophia, asked me. I hesitated. For years, silence had been my prison. Now words were my keys. So I wrote. When love hurts. Freeing yourself from family emotional abuse after 70. I poured into its pages everything I had learned: how sacrifice without reciprocity is exploitation, how boundaries are not cruelty but survival, how starting over is not only possible but sometimes the only road left. The book spread further than I imagined. Letters poured in from Spain, Brazil, Canada, South Africa. Women wrote, "I thought I was alone. Your story gave me courage." Others confessed, "I realized I was treating my mother the way your daughter treated you. I'm changing before it's too late." Each letter was a balm. My pain had become a lantern for others. Angela never wrote to me directly again. Occasionally Helen would mention seeing her at the market, head lowered, aged beyond her years. I felt no triumph, only distance. Sometimes justice is not punishment. It's the quiet separation that lets truth breathe. But my grandchildren, they wrote again. At 12, at 13 their words matured. They asked about Lisbon, about my garden of herbs on the balcony, about the way the Tagus River looked at night. Their letters gave me hope that cycles can break, that love can skip over one generation and still find soil in the next. 3 years after it all began, I sat on my balcony, a silk scarf around my neck, watching the Portuguese mountains blush pink at sunset. Birds circled above the river and I thought about who I had been and who I had become. Angela had wished me dead as her birthday gift. In a way she got what she wanted. The Margaret who lived only for her child died that day. But out of that death, another Margaret was born. One who lived for herself, one who knew her worth, one who would never again confuse manipulation with love. I lifted my glass of wine to the horizon and whispered, "My disappearance was her gift. My new life is mine." So let me ask you, dear listener, if you were in my place, would you have walked away or would you have stayed hoping for change? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel for more life stories like mine. On the screen you'll see 2 more stories of betrayal and rebirth that I know you'll want to hear next. With love, with respect, and with newfound peace. This was my story.